Welcome back to the award-winning Lee Pitts Live, the winner of over 5 NAACP Image Awards. Be sure to go and Google us and check out our website if this is your first time being exposed to Lee Pitts Live. Of course, I'm Lee Pitts, the longtime host of Lee Pitts Live that's been a staple in the South Florida area for over 28 years now. We're so thrilled that we were able to catch in his pass through here in Delray Beach, Florida, the candidate for District 26, the State House of Florida, Percy Williamson, who's a rising political star in the area and on his way to Tallahassee. Get a chance to talk to him about about the public sector and the municipal government and everything else pertaining thereto as it relates to him and his campaign. Now, Percy, we had a great time talking about your sterling career as a bank executive and some of the great impact that you had on the development of in the Delray Beach area and around the state with various people. Then from there, after your banking career, you went into the public sector and municipal government. What made you move from banking to the municipal government, and where did you go for your job there?
Well, once again, I think early in our earlier conversation, I talked about my mentor being Charles Cherry Sr., along with one of his colleagues on the Daytona Beach City Commission, Yvonne Scarlett Golden, approached me and indicated that they had a position in Daytona Beach that they thought that I could possibly add something to my old community. They needed someone who was strong with a financial background, strong in business, and also someone that could handle problems and problem solve. The underlying purpose was that Yvonne Scarlett Golden was ready to run for mayor. She was a Zone 5 commissioner, and she was gearing up to run for mayor to become the first black mayor of Daytona Beach. And so I applied for the job. The position was the Director of Leisure Services, which handled all the parks and recreation, all of the facilities for the city, municipal stadium, the marina, 2 professional golf courses, Jackie Robinson Ballpark. It was the 3rd largest department in city government.
About how many people?
150 employees that actually worked in that department.
Under you?
Yes.
My. 150 people.
Yeah, full-time, part-time, casual.
Yeah. When you walked into that position, you hit the ground running. One of the things I do remember, and we'll get into some other things, but one of the things I remember specifically is the aquatic center there. Yes. That was a raving success, the grand opening and all of that. Let's talk about that, and then we'll get into some other things.
Well, it's funny that you remember that because when I got to town, they used to have a pool there, and the pool had been closed for 5 years, and there was a tree growing up out of the middle of the pool.
Wow.
Yeah, it had been gone in disrepair, and it was in the heart of the black community. And so my goal was, the first thing that I promised the community I would do was to build a new pool and do it very quickly. And of course, there was a lot of naysayers. I had this one lady who used to stop me in grocery stores and, oh, you said you were going to build a new pool, and I don't see any heavy equipment moving around, and you're just doing a whole lot of talking.
I love it. I love it.
So when the time came for us to break ground, I called this lady up, invited her to the groundbreaking, and then I called her to the front, put a hard hat on, and gave her a shovel because I wanted her to turn the first piece of dirt.
Really?
To be able to say I was there when it happened. And I made sure that I had some heavy equipment there to let her know that I'm serious.
My man.
And so we did, in fact, build the pool.
What's the name of that pool, do you recall?
It's the Cypress Aquatic Center, and it was the first thing that had been built on the west side of Daytona Beach in the black community in 40 years.
Whoa.
And
now, before you zip out of that, though,
yes.
How did that make you feel personally? I know it's part of your profession, but personally to see that come to fruition, and now it's a really successful pool. It's just, and it was first rate. I've got a chance to see the pool. It was top of the line, state of the art.
Well, this is probably the most heartwarming thing that has happened in any of my careers. The pool it cost $1.6 million, and it wasn't just any pool. It was an aquatic center where on one end of it you had 6 lanes of an Olympic swimming pool, and then on the other end of it, which was the community part of it, you had fountains, and it looked like SeaWorld or Wet and Wild, with a slide and fountains and a zero depth incline. It was
nice umbrella picnic type benches.
Pool in the state of Florida.
Really?
Design. It was a design that I found in another part of the state and brought it to Daytona Beach. And so the thing that made me feel the most proud was there was a daycare center that was a few blocks away that I invited the director of the daycare center to bring her children to come in and be the first ones to get into the pool. So after we cut the ribbon, she brought all of her kids in. They 3, 4, 5. And so there was this small young lady who came over to me and she said, I mean, it's a fabulous place. And she said, "Is this for us?"
Wow.
And I said, "Yes." Yeah.
Man, that's good.
I'll never forget it.
Man. Wow. I can see the emotions and the tears in your eyes when you hear that.
It was fabulous.
The government going into municipal government type work, civil service type work, vis-a-vis the private sector when you were dealing with the bank and bottom line and numbers. What was the difference, the transition? How was that for you?
Well, my staff used to say, you're too buttoned down. You need to take your jacket off. You don't wear a jacket to this job. And I don't know if you remember, but in banking, we couldn't take our jacket off. I mean, you had to be buttoned down all the time. But the difference is and was and continues to be, and I tell my banking friends all the time, they would call me and say, "Okay, you've been there a while. Tell me the difference between the public sector and the private sector, or municipal government and the bank." And so I said, okay, imagine this. At the bank, 2 + 2 is 4 all day. In municipal government, 2 + 2 could be anything you want it to be. And the X factor was always politics. So if something is off in left field, there's some politics involved in it. And that was the difference. Now, some of the things that we did in banking is pretty cut and dry. But municipal accounting, we would be run out of the bank if we use the type of accounting that's being used in municipal government.
You say that to say what? Private sector works better, public sector works better, pros and cons in both areas. You're adaptable. Expound on that.
I'm adaptable. The first thing I did was understand the processes, protocols, and procedure so that I don't trip over anything or violate anything. You have to know the rules of the game. So I figure out what the rules of the game, and then I can operate. So now when you hear people say, run it like a business, we want government to run like a business. No. You can use business principles, but you can't run it like a business because businesses' final ultimate goal is to make a profit. And that's not what municipal government's purpose is.
I see.
Yeah. Now you can use business principles to manage expenses and enhance revenue, but the profit motive that makes a private entity is what all businesses espouse to do, regardless of anything else. They're trying to make a profit.
Right. And people need to understand too, and you can elaborate on this with your background. The revenues, how the taxes, real estate taxes and all of that, ad valorem taxes, all these various types of taxes make up the budget, those revenues, and you have to, in a government system, you have to, you're responsible for the public money.
That's exactly right, and we have to meet in the sunshine, and then it depends on how much the values of your real estate will determine what the ad valorem mill is going to be, and it'll ultimately determine what your budget is going to be. And you have a small pie that's divided up to try to satisfy all the needs of the public. Everybody wants their taxes cut, but then on the other side of that, everybody wants to take advantage of the government programs.
It's still surprising to know that this little guy, Percy Williamson, makes it to Daytona Beach, Florida. Parents never finished high school. Then you rise through the banking industry and become a vice president. You go on to become a high-ranking person in parks and leisure services for Daytona Beach. And in that capacity, all along the way, you're impacting lives, changing lives, and making the various communities that you touch better off than they were when you first got there.
And that was the attraction to doing it. In addition to the mayor of Daytona Beach, Yvonne Scarlett Golden, becoming the first black mayor in year 2. In 2003, I went to the city of Daytona Beach. She was elected mayor in 2004. And she was elected mayor because we were having a very difficult time in what used to be called Black College Reunion. It was a massive,
I went to it a couple of times, had a ball.
Special event.
Massive.
Where you got a lot of young people descended on Daytona Beach.
That's right.
And it was chaos.
Everything was going on. Yes. I remember going over to just to deviate a bit so I could tell you I know a little bit about Daytona. I came down as a fraternity. I was living in Jacksonville, and it was like, hey, Black College Day at Daytona. I had no idea what that was. I drove down, man, got with my fraternity brother. They had a basketball game going on in the gym between the fraternity. Everybody out there, motorcycle people, just thousands. As far as I can see, black people on the stage, BET. I mean, that is a spectacle. But I think at some point they took it away from there and took it down to Miami.
Well, there was a lot that happened in between. The mayor was elected to get control of it, to try to manage it, because nobody took responsibility for it. There was no promoter.
Right.
There was nobody in charge. This thing kind of happened organically. The city didn't even set up the dates that it was going to show up. It just happened.
Okay.
And so
the city wasn't involved in that.
No, it wasn't.
Date, everybody going to Daytona.
No, and it created a serious problem, and there became a racial divide.
That's right.
Okay, so Madam Mayor was elected to manage this process, to get it under control. And so the day after she got elected, she called me in her office and she turned it over to me.
Really?
Yes.
Parks and Leisure Services.
That's right.
Leisure Services.
That's right. And because that's why I was essentially brought there, was to help her manage this situation.
Can't wait to hear this story.
So the very first thing that I did was I set up an organization called the Collegiate Events Task Force. And the Collegiate Events Task Force was a group of stakeholders: the Chamber of Commerce, the business, Small Business Association, downtown business, the police department. All of the municipalities on the east side of the county were represented. The police department, the sheriff's department, the community groups, restaurant, hotel, motel. They were all at the table, and we talked about what we could do to get control of the situation. And the very first thing we did, and I know that you noticed it in the previous conversations that we've had, is that in order for us to do anything as a community, you have to have a honest conversation about race. And when you move to have an honest conversation about race, it makes a lot of people nervous. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But if we don't have that conversation, we can't fix anything, because you got all these preconceived notions that many of them are untrue, and many of them are biases that we have. So we had to get beyond the race problem. And so we had to have a conversation in order to get beyond it. And some of those very groups of folks had to have, some consultation as far as race was concerned.
I see.
Specifically the police department. So I would say with the stakeholders that we had, we decided that one of the things that we needed to do was disperse everybody from coming to the beach side. 1. 2, we had to set the calendar on when it was going to take place. Black College Reunion was taking place during the middle of April. There's no colleges on spring break in April. All that happens in March. So we set the dates when there was actually spring break for real students, because what was happening is the majority of these people coming were not students. And secondly, we would bring in a lot of police officers from around the country to help augment the number that we had there, who were coming from places that did not have interaction with young black folks. So we got the ministerial alliances involved, we got young people involved, and one of the most important things was that we set up with the police department what we call a traffic pattern, because the majority of the young people who came, they wanted to cruise on the strip. So we set they got a tricked out car.
Right.
They want to be seen. They want to cruise
And play the music.
Play the music, and so we let them do that.
Good.
And I can tell you that we reduced a lot of the ticketing down to nothing, because if the kids are coming to ride and cruise, then why are we, giving them tickets and hassling them and whatnot? But then on the other side of it, we said to the students through our ambassadors, look, we want you to come to town. We want you to have a wonderful time. We want you to spend money, but we also want you to not act like you're somewhere that will allow you to do something that you can't do in your hometown. You need to respect where we are. And so with that, with the group that I created, the Collegiate Events Task Force, we created a marketing campaign, and you can go and Google this, and the campaign was called All About Respect. You respect our city, we respect you, you have a wonderful time, you spend money, you go home. Everybody's safe. The second thing was we dispersed a lot of the activities off the beach side, and we were able to manage it. We had a lot of restaurants and hotels closing down whenever that weekend would come around, because they didn't want more than a couple students in their place. And so we had to counsel them on how that basically looked to the people that were coming as well as the people there in town. A lot of people did not frequent those places during the off time, because you're going to close your business while these kids are here in town. That's not right. Half of the city loved it and half hated it, and that was the business community as well as the community at large.
And the conclusion, the final product was?
We got control of it. We managed it. We took away a lot of the biases. We got control of the students. We gave them things to do. We didn't leave it to their own devices. If you provide activities for them, basketball games, mini concerts and whatnot, before it was only BET. They were the driving force. And so we managed with BET to make things happen in a more fluid kind of way. Now, what eventually happened was BET decided that they wanted it a little more freewheeling, so they moved to Miami, to South Beach. And
freewheeling.
Yes. And so they moved it to South Beach, and that's how it eventually got down to South Florida. I don't know what happened to it once it got down here, but that's what happened in Daytona.
But before we move away from that, in Daytona, that particular area, that particular event, the benefits of it, the revenues from it, had gotten to the point where the cost and all the other factors associated outside of it, the cost outweighed the benefit.
It did, and the image of the city was hurt, because you had a lot of.
I read some of the articles back then.
A lot of the businesses would not allow more than one or two students, any students, to come in and use the restrooms or frequent or do anything. And so the hotels actually got sued because they were limiting access and making people wear a particular wristband to show whether or not you were a resident or you were checked in, a guest or not. And so we essentially needed to get control of that, because the image of the city was suffering based on
keep that mic up.
Based on some of the activities that were taking place that was outside of our control.
We're gonna come right back with some more conversation with candidate for District 26, Percy Williamson. We got a chance to learn a lot about some things that he fixed for sure. State House for the state of Florida. We'll be right back with more conversation.